When it comes to classic RPGs, few games stand taller than 1997's Fallout, and one of the reasons why this game is so enduring is the sheer flexibility of its character creation system. The choices you make on this screen will have grave consequences throughout the game, as we're about to see in this video. I'm sure the story of Fallout is all very familiar by now. In the year 2077, the world was engulfed in nuclear fire. A handful of people managed to make it to the underground vaults, where they have a safe but extremely constrained existence. But there's a problem. Our vault's water purification ship has failed, and we don't have any way of fixing it. The only solution is to send someone up to the irradiated surface in the hopes of finding a replacement in another vault. Too bad the person they selected for the job is Jeb. Your character in Fallout has 7 basic attributes: strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. Of these, intelligence is one of the most important, as it determines how many additional skill points you get on level up. But for this playthrough, we're going to be dropping our intelligence all the way down to 1. To compensate, we'll put the extra points into strength, endurance, and luck, and our tag skills are going to revolve around punching people, hitting people with blunt objects, and throwing things. We can also give ourselves up to 2 optional traits. I chose Fast Shot, allowing us to attack more often at the cost of losing the aimed shot ability, and Jinxed, which will give our enemies more critical failures as well as us. But perhaps our maxed out luck stat will counteract our critical failures, at least that's the theory. We'll see how well it works out in practice. So that is Jeb, a stupid, lumbering oaf who is both extremely lucky and extremely cursed. This does raise the question of why the Overseer sent this man in particular out for the water chip. Maybe there is no problem with it and this whole thing is just an excuse to get rid of an unwanted vault dweller. And confirming our suspicions is the skeletal body just outside the vault entrance, still clad in its blue vault jumpsuit. It looks like Jeb isn't the first person the Overseer sent on this snipe hunt. Jeb makes his way through the tunnel leading to the outside world, being sure to punch every single rat that he claps eyes on. We're going to need every scrap of experience that we can get, for reasons that will soon become obvious. Having had his fill of rat punching, Jeb soon reaches the mouth of the cave, seeing natural light for the first time in his life. But the profundity of the moment is ultimately lost on him, for he has an intelligence score of 1. He then makes his way east towards Vault 15, where the Overseer has told him another water chip can be found. On the way there, however, he stumbles across the village of Shady Sands, a settlement that will be very important in the Fallout canon, as it will eventually become the capital of the new California Republic. When we go to talk with the 2 NPCs guarding the gate, however, we discover why playing with low intelligence is such a handicap, as it means that we are unable to communicate in anything other than oohs, ahs, grunts, and growls. This means that most NPCs will blow us off, including Ian here. He is a potential follower, and he can tell you about some of the surrounding settlements, but with Jeb, he simply says that he doesn't have time to talk to morons. We can try talking with the village leader Aradesh and his daughter Tandy, but our interactions with them are brief, as you can't really hold a conversation with someone who can only say things like herg and wub wub. Being too stupid to understand the concept of personal property, Jeb acquires some rope and a sledgehammer, both of which will be useful in the future. With nothing more to be done here, Jeb continues on his way to Vault 15, which he soon discovers is completely abandoned, as the inhabitants left it to found the village of Shady Sands. The vault is crawling with mole rats and other mutated creatures, and Jeb is in his element, punching and smashing things without a care in the world, and he even manages to find a gun tucked away in one of the rooms. This does not bode well for the future of the wasteland. Because we have the Jinxed trait, our enemies are constantly rolling critical failures, which has any number of effects, from hurting themselves to losing their turns. Our exploration of Vault 13 proves futile, however, as the water chip is buried beneath a pile of rubble. Still, it was not all for naught, as we found some armor in addition to some supplies. When we return to Shady Sands, Jeb decides to go into a nearby cave, not really understanding what people were talking about when they said it was dangerous. The cave is filled with rad scorpions, who can be rather tough at low levels, but through sheer force of will, Jeb prevails. He may not be smart or even able to speak, but once he sets his mind to something, there's nothing that can stand in his way. But with the scorpions dealt with, he now has no idea where to go or even where nearby settlements are. Not knowing what else to do, Jeb heads back to the vault to pick up some supplies and spend some time on the interwebs. Again, there are a few quests you can do here which involve your fellow vault dwellers, but Jeb is too stupid to pick up on any of them. Now, there are these consumables called mentats that you can use to raise your intelligence temporarily, but to make this run more challenging, I am not going to use them. Jeb returns to Shady Sands and learns that Ardesh's daughter Tandy has been kidnapped by a gang of raiders called the Khans. Not really appreciating the danger, Jeb talks to their leader, Garl Deathhand, which makes him and the rest of the raiders hostile, and Jeb does not survive the resulting shootout. Reloading a save file, we try again, this time with a more subtle approach. We pick the lock on Tandy's cell and try to escape, only to be killed once again. Perhaps a more direct solution is required. Back in Vault 15, Jeb acquires some dynamite. His brilliant strategy is to start the timer, drop it at Garl's feet, and then run like hell, hoping that no one notices. But, spoiler alert, everyone notices, and Jeb is once again killed. In our next attempt, we simply skirt around the perimeter, killing off the raiders one by one. When their HP gets too low, they will attempt to flee, and one of them is accidentally shot by his comrades as he does so. That's the power of Jeb, lowering the intelligence of everyone around him. Soon enough, we get the attention of Garl Deathhand, who proves to be a tough enemy. Though it takes most of our stim packs, we prevail, sending him straight to hell. We take his metal armor, which provides superior damage resistance. Armor in classic Fallout is rather complicated. It has an armor class, which affects your chance to be hit, but also damage threshold, which is subtracted from incoming damage, and damage resistance, which mitigates a percentage of incoming damage. After looting the raiders' encampment and reuniting Tandy with her father, Jeb is once again at a loss as to what to do next. Normally, you can learn the locations of settlements by talking with NPCs, except that our ability to communicate is next to zero, so we learn nothing about the wasteland, and all we can do is wander randomly until we stumble into a place called Junktown. True to its name, Junktown is built out of, well, junk, but it's the most developed settlement we've encountered thus far, with a general store, a bar, a hotel, and even a casino. It's run by a man named Killian Darkwater, but no sooner have we finished talking with him than an assassin walks in and starts blasting. We send him screaming to hell, and then Killian tells us that the man who sent him, Gizmo, must be dealt with. Gizmo runs the casino, and while our high luck skill might have come in useful when playing slots or roulette, Jeb is too stupid to figure out gambling. Gizmo refuses to speak with him, so Jeb decides to arm some explosives and then set them down near his desk. Predictably, this causes Gizmo and his bodyguard to turn hostile, but since Gizmo can't move from his desk, this fight isn't too terribly difficult. But Jeb is not hailed as a hero, for he attacked Gizmo without getting evidence of his wrongdoing. Yes, even in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, Killian is a stickler for due process, a phrase that has far too many syllables for Jeb to understand. On account of our extrajudicial killing, we are told to leave Junktown and never come back. Pretty bold of them to assume that Jeb knows anything about the consequences of his actions. With no idea where to go next, Jeb continues to wander the wasteland aimlessly, eventually bumbling into an outpost of the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood has a fairly extensive backstory, but all Jeb cares about is the big shiny armor worn by the men outside. He tries talking to one of them, a man named Cabot, but like everyone else in the wasteland, he doesn't have the time or the patience to talk to an idiot. The other initiate bluntly tells us that we don't have a chance in hell of getting into their stupid club for jerks, but if we're looking for some better equipment, then we ought to check out an area called the Glow, located in the south. He even provides us with some Rad-X to ward off the radiation. Wow, what a nice guy! One thing that always strikes me about Fallout 1 is how different it is tonally from later games. The Fallout universe can get rather wacky at times, but for the most part Fallout 1 is a much bleaker and more serious game with only the occasional moments of black humor to give some levity to the proceedings. You really get the impression that civilization is hanging on by a thread and only just beginning to reassert itself after the apocalypse. So off Jeb goes, moving in a vaguely southern direction, and then he stumbles into a city called the Hub, the biggest settlement he's seen thus far. It's so big that it even has its own police force. Unfortunately, the people here aren't any more welcoming to him, and thus we are again locked out of a great deal of the quests in the city. One of the caravan masters even takes our unintelligible speech as a sign that we're a dirty chem addict. Why, that's ridiculous. Jeb has never used drugs in his life, and he never will. To the south, Jeb encounters a strange congregation called the Children of the Cathedral, whose banner is the radiation hazard symbol. His curiosity aroused, Jeb wanders inside and speaks to their leader, Jane, whom he evidently thinks is his mom. Things do not go well.
How dare you speak to me in that manner? You will be punished for your insolence! Guards!
What makes this interaction amusing is that Jane is voiced by Tress MacNeille, who also voiced Mom in Futurama. This fight can be rather difficult, as Jane is accompanied by two rather tough bodyguards. Jeb may be dumb, but he knows when he's outnumbered, so he decides that doing drugs is the solution to his problem. It takes quite a few stimpaks, but eventually we kill Jane and the rest of the congregation, and in the locked room in the back, we find a treasure trove of goodies, including this set of Children of the Cathedral robes, which will prove useful later in the game. On the east side of the hub, we find some merchants selling some very lovely combat armor, but at nearly 30,000 caps, it's well beyond our means. To the south, we find a mutant named Harold, who would normally provide a lot of information about the game's backstory, but alas, Jeb is incapable of learning any of it. I really do have to hand it to Interplay here. It was a ballsy move to allow players to create a character who would miss out on a good 3/4 of the game. Now, this is the part where you'd expect me to turn this video into a rant about how badly Bethesda screwed up the Fallout games, but instead, I'm going to give you this one bit of advice. You gotta let it go, my dudes. Bethesda acquired the rights to Fallout in 2004, which was 21 years ago. If a man's wife left him that long ago, and he was still complaining bitterly about it in the present, we'd rightfully call him a pathetic loser and tell him that he needs to move on. But apparently, if you're a capital G gamer, it's perfectly fine to nurse your grievances and resentment long after most sensible people would have gotten over it. I mean, it's not like letting go of the past is a recurring theme in the Fallout games or anything. Anyway, Jeb continues to blunder around the eastern part of the hub, eventually coming across a curious underground passage, one filled with traps and locked doors. His curiosity gets the better of him, and after stumbling his way through the hallway, he encounters a strange group of people led by a man named Loxley, who isn't any more receptive to Jeb's caveman-like attempts at communicating than anyone else we've met.
Well, na. How did a total moron such as yourself get past my defenses? Sorry, no idiot savants allowed. We like good conversation here. Jasmine, show our drooling friend the door, please.
Once again, our hero finds himself at a loss as to what to do next, so Jeb does what Jeb does best, wandering aimlessly until he stumbles into something interesting. In this case, the Necropolis, the bombed-out ruins of Bakersfield, although its location on the map more closely corresponds to Barstow. It's filled with ghouls and, more concerningly, super mutants. Jeb doesn't know who these huge green people are or what they're doing here, but somehow he senses in them a kindred spirit.
Hey, you not look like ghoul. How come? Huh? What?
Man, you know you're in a bad way intellectually when you can't even talk to a super mutant. And no, I have no idea why Jeb seems to think that everyone's his mom. Unresolved childhood issues, perhaps. Inside one of the nearby rooms is a ladder that leads down into the sewers, which leads to yet another ladder. Descending into the depths, he discovers a type of glowing ghoul that irradiates him with their attacks. Still, they're no match for his sledgehammer, and after fighting his way through them, Jeb discovers another vault. It's filled with even more ghouls, but then, by sheer dumb luck, he discovers a water chip, the very same kind that Vault 13 desperately needs. Overjoyed, Jeb rushes back home, but things must have gotten pretty desperate in the time that he was gone because the Overseer is in no mood for his crap.
Have you found the chip? Oh, that's great. Can I have the chip, please? No, not that. I want the computer chip. No, the chip. Just give me the chip! Thank you. Now, go to the library and rest for a while, okay? Yes, you can touch things.
After looking over the data, the Overseer has another job for us.
Oh, yeah. It's like this. There is a bad place where the bad mutants come from. It is bad. Vault is good. Please, go destroy bad place.
Jeb might not understand much, but he understands hurting people. Before he goes around smashing things and hitting stuff, however, he decides to have a look at the Glow, the place the Brotherhood Paladins mentioned. It's actually the remains of a pre-war research facility that took a direct hit from a nuclear warhead, meaning that it's heavily irradiated. Fortunately, we can take 2 doses of Rad-X to make us immune to the radiation, and then we head down inside. The Glow is a treasure trove of loot, including things like plasma rifles, rocket launchers, and Gatling guns, none of which Jeb is qualified to use. There is a 5th floor that can only be accessed via a special elevator, but it requires repairing a generator, and Jeb isn't skilled enough to do so. That means we have to go all the way back to the hub, read some skill books until our repair skill is high enough, and then we can reach the 5th floor. There are some data disks here describing something called a forced evolutionary virus, but it's all full of big words that Jeb can't understand. Coming here was definitely worth it, however, because we snag a suit of combat armor, and with all the money we make from selling our loot, Jeb can at last buy the weapon he's been dreaming about ever since he was a boy, the Super Sledge. We are now approaching the endgame, and our inability to do quests has left us severely underleveled. We'll have to make up the XP somehow, and the only way we can do that is by killing people. We kill all the super mutants in the Necropolis, and then we go and kill the Brotherhood Paladins who tried to trick us into going into a radioactive hellhole. Jeb tries valiantly to open the door leading to the bunker, even resorting to using dynamite, but alas, his rampage cannot continue. Our journey then takes us to the Boneyard, the bombed-out remains of Los Angeles. What's interesting about this place is that, looking at the map, we can see a large crater where Irvine used to be, which also happens to be the location of Interplay Entertainment. Going to the Boneyard drops us into Aditum, where there are a number of quests, none of which we can do. Continuing to explore, Jeb runs into a group called the Followers of the Apocalypse. How ridiculous, he thinks. Who would ever want to follow an apocalypse? It sounds dangerous. Nearby, Jeb runs across a guy named Chris Avalone. That was for Neverwinter Nights 2, you son of a bitch! Life continues to prove difficult for old Jeb because he suddenly finds himself attacked by Deathclaws. They're fast, have loads of HP, and can attack many times per round. Yet with his sledgehammer and automatic shotgun, Jeb sends them all back to whatever hell they crawled out of. He then stumbles into a curious building surrounded by a moat of toxic waste. The guy guarding the bridge refuses to let Jeb pass on account of him being a moron, but we find a narrow spot in the moat we can cross. These are the Gunrunners, the Wasteland's premier dealer in firearms, and when we talk to them, we actually get regular dialogue options and not low intelligence ones. If I had to guess as to the reason for this, the developers probably didn't realize that you could cross the moat and thus never realized that a low-intelligence vault dweller could get inside, and so they never wrote the dialogue for them. We've done all we can in the Boneyard, which admittedly isn't much. There are 2 places we need to go to finish the game. One of them is the Mariposa military base located near the northwest corner of the map, which is where the super mutants are being created. And here is where the game starts getting rough, because you'll be facing a large number of super mutants equipped with energy weapons, Gatling guns, and rocket launchers, all of which can easily one-shot you. We can use a portable radio to lure away the guards outside, but when we head inside the base, we are immediately confronted by a trio of super mutants, and despite my efforts, poor Jeb gets torn to shreds again and again and again. Perhaps a different approach is required. We have the Children of the Cathedral robes, and somewhere inside Jeb's brain, there is a flicker of understanding, a notion that he might use them to disguise himself. Sure enough, they let us pass by the super mutants, but our troubles aren't yet over. There is someone we need to kill here, a super mutant named the Lieutenant, but to reach him, we have to pass by this guard, whom we can't bluff with our disguise. Getting into a fight with him puts the base on alert, which we don't want, so I try to use this stealth boy we acquired earlier to sneak our way past. But even with the invisibility field, we get caught over and over, until finally the dice roll in our favor and we sneak past. On the next level, we face the Lieutenant, who is easily the toughest foe we've faced thus far, requiring me to lob a half-dozen plasma grenades at him until he collapses into a gory mess. Fallout does let you save in combat, which might seem like a good idea considering how much the random number generator can screw you over in this game, but I would not recommend doing this because it can easily wind up corrupting your save files. With a lieutenant dead, we find an inauspicious key in one of the lockers, which will be vitally important later on. Also on this area are the vats used to turn people into super mutants, and Jeb knows this place must be destroyed, but how? There is a computer console we can use to activate the base's self-destruct mechanism, but Jeb can't figure out how to do so, so he instead resorts to blowing up the console with some C4 explosives, which triggers the self-destruct countdown. He flees as fast as his legs can carry him, and soon the entire facility goes up in flames. As Jeb walks away from the flaming wreckage, the TARDIS suddenly appears for no reason. We've destroyed the source of the super mutants, but we still need to locate and eliminate their leader, whoever that might be. They can be found underneath this impressive Art Deco cathedral in the south of the Boneyard, but getting into the underground areas can prove tricky, as you'll need a keycard held by a guy named Morpheus. Talking to Morpheus ends in combat. We can kill him easily enough, but fighting also alerts some Nightkin, super mutants equipped with stealth boys, who are much tougher. So tough, in fact, that I decide to try to steal the keycards from Morpheus. To my surprise, Jeb actually succeeds, but then I realize that I had stolen the wrong one, which is definitely a Jeb move, forcing me to go back upstairs to steal the right one. Downstairs appears to be empty, but then one of the robed children of the cathedral appears through a hidden door. We kill him, but then the door shuts behind him. To open it, you have to do the somewhat unintuitive action of using the trap skill on the nearby bookcase. Past the doorway, we encounter some hideous abominations. One is a strange, floating creature, the other is some multi-legged horror called a centaur that has a dog and a human's head attached to its body. Further on, Jeb finds yet another vault, this one home to the leader of the mutants, a man known only as the Master. We won't ever be meeting him, of course, or learning anything about him whatsoever, because we find a nuclear bomb located deep inside the vault. After killing the two super mutants guarding it, Jeb uses the key he found in the Mariposa military base to start the countdown to detonation. He flees back upstairs just in time to see the whole cathedral explode into nuclear fire. With the Master dead and his military base destroyed, the wasteland is once again safe. Well, relatively safe at any rate. We are then presented with a series of ending slides, which tells us that because Jeb wasted so much time wandering aimlessly, a large number of factions and settlements were wiped out by super mutants. But despite being a hero, not all is well back in Vault 13. The Overseer tells Jeb, using a lot of words he doesn't understand, that he can't let him back into the vault, fearing that he would entice others to leave, and thus he is banished to the wasteland. I knew it! I knew this was all just one big excuse to get rid of Jeb. For all we know, those super mutants we wiped out were all completely innocent. I mean, we did go through the majority of the game learning absolutely nothing about our situation. Now, I wouldn't say that playing as a character like Jeb was all that terribly enjoyable. In fact, it was extremely frustrating at times, but it is a testament to the flexibility of Fallout's mechanics that the game allows you to play and finish the game with such a suboptimal character. But One question remains. Whatever became of Jeb? Some say he perished alone and forgotten somewhere out in the wasteland. Some say that he wanders away still, ever in search of his mother. One thing is for certain, however. His is a legend the post-nuclear world won't soon be forgetting.